So what I want to talk about today is the foundation for what we're going to do in this class and why it's important. What can we do with statistics? Now let's think about this. Every day we make tons of decisions. But what basis do we make our decisions on? So if we buy a car, stop copying. Look at me. If we buy a car, what basis do we buy a car? Because there's a million types of cars out there. What is important to you? Price. Can I afford this car? Okay, so we've knocked out a whole bunch of cars. It's like there used to be like a Carfax commercial, or like, I just got rid of all those cars. What's next? Miles. New, used, dilapidated. There goes those cars. Gas mileage, perhaps. How many people you can fit in it? How many human beings can be in it? Okay? All of those are very sensible, and you get pats on the back, shiny gold stars for those answers. Now give me the stupid answers. What color? What kind of car did you get? A blue one. Oh, that hurts my brain. Okay. What other stupid things do we do? Do we buy a car based on? The brand? How's that stupid? Yeah. Okay. Nope. Fords are horrible. Okay. Chevys are horrible. Okay. Guess what? They all break down. Okay. Every single car ever made has broken down at some point or another. Okay. What else? Really? That matters to people? Yep, interior color. Give me the most vague sort of reason why you, if you could buy any car, would buy a car. It's cool. Right? All right. I'm actually okay with that. Right? Cars can look cool. Unfortunately, it's one of those, beauties in the eye of the beholder thing. And whoever drives, there's somebody living around me that's got a Cadillac. And it's orange. Like, you had me with the Caddy because it's got the V8 in it, but then it's orange. But to that person, that orange is bitchin' cool. Okay. So one of the things that we can do is we can use statistics to help us either make decisions in life, like miles per gallon. Miles per gallon is a statistic. Right? It is a computation. You actually have to know a little bit of math to do miles per, and that just means division, gallon. So the next time you fill up your car, you hit the reset the trip thing, a little trip counter, and then drive for a long time. But the trick is when you refill your gas tank, you have to fill your gas tank. None of this like, oh, I only got $5 thing. Doesn't work. You can't calculate miles per gallon $5 at a time. You can, but it'd take a really long time. Right? So when we make decisions in our lives, statistics can be helpful. Not only statistics that we generate ourselves, like our budget or miles per gallon, but also just this general idea that people are out there trying to order the world. So if I were to say your number one priority is to buy a safe car, what do you think the safest car out there is? That's the answer I wanted to hear. Volvo. Volvo has they call it their 2020 vision. By 2020, they want to create a car that you can't get killed in. Yep, and they're going to try to do that. Okay, so by 2020, we should all be in the market for Volvos because they have this perception that they are a safe car. Subaru tried to do it too. They had a great commercial out where they're like, they show the wreck go from place to place. You might remember this commercial. And the first question anybody asks when they see the wreck is, what happened? And the answer is always, they made it. And it's like, oh, you want to buy a Subaru because you can wreck that son of a bitch and you're going to live. Well, these answers come from testing. Right? I love watching car crash test videos. They're just kind of cool. All right? We actually rate them. There's a 5-star rating system. Right? This is not just advertising gimmicks. These are actual real things. Because of all places, the insurance company needs to know how much to charge you for insurance based upon how much it would cost, when you wreck your Mustang. Because Mustangs have problems. They don't like to keep 4 wheels on the actual road at the same time. But Volvos, they love it. And they will let you know, just want to let you know, one of your tires is a pound under the other tires. You might want to check that out. Can I reroute the GPS to the nearest Volvo dealership? Please? In fact, I will just take you to the nearest Volvo dealership. You can take your hands off the car. So when we make decisions like, should I be drinking more? Should I drink red wine? My doctor actually told me, you should drink wine. I don't like wine. I don't drink to get drunk. Why? Well, it's good for your heart. Is it though? Because we can go and find studies that show us that it either will keep me immortal or do absolutely nothing but get me drunk. No proof that red wine improves heart health. How do we come up with these answers? Well, we do research. So we can use statistics when we make decisions. But I also think that we can use statistics to understand the world. And this is not political commentary, but we live in a time where facts are up for debate. Again, that word fact, no, there's no debate over facts. Facts are facts. That's why they're not opinions. So we're living in this strange time where up is down and cats and dogs are living together in peace and harmony, and everything that is considered an opinion somehow rises to the level of fact. And I'd like to just sort of pull us back and say, well, wait a minute. We're going to have to understand what a fact is and what role statistics has in helping us to understand the world that's going on around us. I love it that the president likes to Twitter, but I love it more that people like to Twitter right back at him. So it's like unprecedented levels of flooding in Houston. And everybody's like, climate change. Climate change. We told you this was going to happen. Waters get warmer. It adds fuel and energy to hurricanes. You get bigger, stronger hurricanes because the water is warmer, because the air is warmer, because of climate change. This is something that we know, most of us, to help us understand the world, including the earth. The earth is our world. So, how do we know what is true? Well, statistics can tell us, is something true or not? And that can be everything down to how long are you going to live? What are you more likely to be killed by? Should you go out and buy a Powerball ticket? Fun fact, you're more likely to be ate by a shark than you are to win the Powerball. Just want to throw that out there. Based upon probability, actual number of people eaten by a shark compared to actual number of people playing the Powerball. All right. But the reason I think that statistics is so important is because we are living in a strange period where truth and fact is questioned. And actually, we have lots of different sources of truth. Notice I put it up in the scary air quotes, right? Where does truth come from? Well, my favorite thing about truth is that in some essences, it comes from investment. And none of you are helping me out today with this example, I don't think. Nobody's wearing a sports hat. But I got 2 guys in Patagonia hats. Why? Why are you wearing Patagonia hats? Forwards and backwards. So you're sending a signal out to the world. You know why you're wearing one? Nope, it's a hat. I got Nike and Under Armour. We can go with that. Why Nike? Just do it. Under Armour. He works there. My best example of investment is usually sports loyalty, right? Sports loyalty, right? Who's the best quarterback of all time? Answer to a loaded question. Come on, somebody in here say Tom Brady. Tom Brady. Why? He's no, right? So when you answer these questions, a lot of time your truth, best quarterback of all time, might be tied to your allegiances and or investment into rooting for a sports team. And also apparel and memorabilia sales. Okay. So sometimes our truth is something that we create around us. Also, truth can come from authority. And I am the #1 expert on this because I have children. And they'll ask me a question, and I can't tell you how many times per day I say, because I said so. Me. I said so. Right? We can get our truth from authority, whether that is a parent, a professor, a leader in a church, a government official, a cop. Right? There's some level of truth to the I said so. Right? Why can't I park my car here on the sidewalk? Because I said so. Why not? Because the law says so. Okay. But my car physically will park on the sidewalk. I've done it a number of times. It's really easy. Sometimes they put those little curb cutouts there to help you up onto the sidewalk. We can also get truth from what we derive to be logically correct. And so we all become Vulcans from Star Trek, right? We just think, well, it must be true, right? My logic has led me to this conclusion. Go ahead and take Philosophy 110. They'll fix you on all that. Faith, you can't really see this, but you really can't see it now because you shouldn't put the light switches all in one spot. You should put them on different sides of the room. This is known as an infographic, and what we're doing is we're linking up different data points together based upon whether or not they connect. And this is an interesting infographic. It made the rounds on Facebook this summer. Anybody recognize this? These are all the contradictions in the Bible. So somebody made a website and they made this infographic. And originally what they did was they created all the times that the Bible references itself. So if they mention something in Deuteronomy but also in Leviticus, you get a little connection. And then they actually looked at those connections, and if they contradicted, they became red. And these are all the contradictions. So you're like, oh, pretty rainbow. Yeah. No, this is actually, the level of confusion by reading the Bible. I like infographics. They're pretty. Right? But we can get our truth, right, from our faith, which is, again, maybe some logic, maybe a combination of investment and authority. Okay. And last but not least, some of us, we get our truth from science, but even then, we have discussions over, well, is there a consensus? Does everybody agree? Should I start drinking red wine or stop drinking red wine? Should I have a little bit or a lot? Because I want to live forever. Should I just bathe in it and not drink it? our attempt in understanding statistics is to focus on this part. And in doing science, we can actually test some of the claims of truth from these sources. We can do that. Anybody in here a baseball fan? Okay. You ever heard of WAR or WAR as a statistic? What is WAR? Yeah. So how good is Mike Trout? Well, Mike Trout does this. Your average replacement level player, like just some guy you call up from AAA, does this. You center it on the replacement player at 0.0, and Mike Trout leads the league in WAR every year. And over time, we can accumulate WAR and add it all together and say, who is the best baseball player of all time? Well, people believe that we can quantify this. We can add it all together and see who has had the most impact on a baseball team. We can do that as a test of our investment towards the team. It turns out that the best baseball player of all time was not a New York Yankee. I'm sorry, Yankees fans. All right. We make decisions based upon what we think or what we're told is science. I love some of these headlines. I like to collect the headlines from when the press reports on a scientific study. Male jurors more likely to find overweight women guilty. Okay. So ladies, if you ever find yourself on trial, try to drop some weight. That's the lesson, right? Harvard study, gun control is counterproductive. How? Friends with benefits have safer sex, study finds, so everybody needs to find a friend with a benefit rather than an actual committed relationship, because you'll have safer sex. You know why? Because you've chose your partner under the, yeah, but never going to have a child with this person. Hence the safer sex part. I don't want people to know we're having sex. And a pregnancy would definitely lead to that. Keep this quiet. All right. If you find these throughout the semester, feel free to send them to me. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to find a better version of truth? Well, first thing we have to do as social scientists is separate facts, back to that term again, from our values. Somebody give me an example of a value that you have. It can be a cliche. You have no values? Nobody in here has any values whatsoever. Okay, you don't actually have to believe it. Maybe you've heard this. Lorenz? Yeah, but give me one. Like, I need an example. There you go. Divorce is wrong. That's a value you have. Why is divorce wrong? Like, why should two people who hate each other have to live together? Okay, somebody. Because you've made a vow, right? You've made a vow. Your words need to mean something. You've pledged to live till death do you part, even if that means you're going to live with somebody you hate and you'll kill each other. Because we value honesty. Okay, that's not a fact. That's something you believe in. We're going to focus on the fact that is empirically based. Empirically is a fancy college word for something that is observed evidence. Observed evidence. If you want to act like my son John, think of this as following up something you've heard with why. constantly until somebody gives you the evidence that they, in fact, have observed. It's better if people don't get divorced. Why? Because you made a vow. Yeah, but why? Go back to the why is it better that why shouldn't people get divorced? What is the foundation for that other than because I think so or because I said so? Right? Because children of divorced parents are 10 times more likely to become serial killers. Completely made that up, by the way. But that itself can be empirically based. We can study that. Because we know who serial killers are. We can look at their backgrounds. That's selection on the dependent variable. Or we can just, do a study of divorced parents and see what kind of felonious kids came out of those divorces. We can do that as well. You notice that when I said we have some sort of fact, that fact is going to be based upon the scientific method. Okay? We're going to have something that has a universal process where we all agree that there's a way to study this question. We'll be open-minded, but we'll be skeptical. That's that part of going, let me take a second look at this. Let's really test this idea out. Let's try to get some data. Is this the best data we have? Is this the way to go about this process of finding a fact? This is the #1 challenge that undergraduates are going to have. Every semester when I ask you to write a paper, somebody in here is going to write a paper about guns and the Second Amendment, and that's why we shouldn't have gun control. And first of all, I'm a Second Amendment scholar and you're wrong. Second of all, that's not scientifically based. You actually have to ask a research question where you examine what facts occur. Okay. Separating fact from values. If you're going to tell me that pornography should be banned, you got to tell me why it's bad. You actually have to have some evidence other than I don't like it. Okay, it leads to more violence in women. I'll accept that answer, but now you have to empirically test it in order for it to become a fact instead of a belief. Now, for me, I do this with politics. And if you're thinking, well, I do public health or I do social comm, yeah, you do actually politics too. All right? Theater, you're on your own. All right? Politics as a profession is one that involves zero sums. So at the end of the day, everybody can't get what they want. There has to be a winner and a loser. I wish it would be good if we could all agree that we'll respect each other's fundamental rights. Like, you can have guns, but I get to have abortions. Like, we can have enough trade-offs, and then nobody's happy, but everybody has their rights. But politics isn't like that. It's zero sum. And the perception is that if you have your rights, well, that's going to infringe upon my liberty. So if you have your guns, that's going to infringe on my liberty of not getting shot when I yell at you at a stoplight. Road rage. Right. Or if I get my abortion, that's not going to offend your religion because of the dead babies. Right? So we have this hard time in politics accepting, allowing other people to exercise their rights because somehow it infringes upon our liberties. But again, we're going to recognize that when we're studying subjects in social science, that we're doing it based upon an empirical question. Again, evidence-based. Normative is a word that is closely linked to the should argument. Right? We should do this because we should stay together and not allow divorce because you made a vow. Right? That's more of a normative question. What should we do? And usually, this is more of for the philosophy side. A normative question, the idea that you can arrive at a right answer just basically on reason alone, rather than evidence. So you might be talking about things like justice. Well, justice is a normative conception. It's not something you can easily quantify or identify. You just got to feel it. This distinction here between empirical and normative is why I have a really hard time giving television interviews. Reporters always want to ask me should questions. Should Donald Trump appoint Nikki Haley to be Secretary of State? No. He shouldn't. That's just my opinion. Right? Do presidents typically appoint people with zero diplomatic experience to hold positions in the State Department or the UN? No, they don't. You know how I know that? I can look at the list of people who get appointed. And it's rarely governors from the South. Okay? Really hard to give television interviews. They want to ask the should questions. They want to ask whether or not a law is right or wrong. There was a guy that was upset with the local court system. And so he bought a big, not a tractor trailer size truck, but more like a box truck. Kind of like a UPS size kind of truck. And on the side of the box part of it, he painted "So-and-so is a whore." And it's parked across the street from an elementary school. So I get a reporter calling me up, and they want to come in and talk about it. And the first thing he asked me is, should this truck be parked across the street from an elementary school? That's a should question. I don't like answering those questions. So I have to default to some more of the empirical side, right? And me, being what I am and what I study, I divert to the law side. And I said, well, according to the law, it's not obscene. It does not fit the definition of obscenity. There's no cartoon of the person being a whore. There's no picture of whoring. Public officials, slander's a little hard to prove, but I don't think he means that kind of whore. So I have to sort of deflect of, is it okay for kids to see the word whore, which I think is probably okay, to, does he have the right to do this? Right. So we walk this very fine line a lot of the time. I think being around family is the worst. Because for me, my family thinks I'm a lawyer because I study constitutional law. But they also think that I want to get involved in politics because I teach classes in political science. And so anytime somebody comes to me about, well, this person's awful, it's like, actually, they're all pretty awful. Right? It's hard trying to be objective and trying to focus on what we actually know is fact versus you just want me to validate your opinion because I have some authority. Right? You want me to say that your thoughts and values are truth. That's not my job. Right? My job is to actually answer questions. Does one thing lead to another thing? So that's what political science and really social science in general isn't. Right? We're not here to validate people's feelings or beliefs. We're here to answer honest questions about the impact or the effect of one event, one condition on an outcome, whether it's your health, who gets incarcerated, who wins an election. Okay. So what I'm going to do today is walk you through the scientific process. Right? How is it that we, as social scientists, are going to use statistics to answer research questions. So, got to do it. Today is the one day where we're going to sort of set up why we're using statistics in a larger framework to get at facts rather than values. If you're going to be doing any copying, slide copying, you have my permission now. I'll say all this was taken right from the textbook, so if you do the reading, you got the same thing. Okay? All right. Step one. I, as a professor, need to get more money and advance in my profession. I need to write and publish. Has anybody ever heard the expression publish or perish? It's kind of true, not really. Like there's an inkling of it in there. Now, I could just write things about why Fight Club is the best movie that ever existed. But that's normative. I'd have to sort of quantify it and have a scientific reason to base on why Fight Club is the best movie ever. Instead of doing that, and this is where I don't like the term professor. I don't profess a lot. Like I talk a hell of a lot. But I'm not professing anything that I believe. I'm not trying to convince you to change your mind or live the way I do. Right? I'm not trying to say, all right, this is why we should give up soda. And everybody should drink seltzer instead. Like, I don't really profess that much. But what I do is I study questions that are interesting to me. And in order to do that, I have to follow this scientific method. I have to follow our agreed upon way in which we're going to ask and answer questions. So anything that I write should be focused on, first, a research hypothesis. Somebody here just had a flashback to like high school chemistry. What do you remember from high school science? Any cool experiments? Oh, the cat thing. We did frogs, fetal pig. The cat thing was like optional because it was really creepy. Anybody remember any experiments? Okay, so you take a nail and you put it in liquid and you see what happens to it. Does it rust or does it not rust? Right? Essentially, is the liquid providing oxygen to the nail so that it can oxidate and produce rust? Or is it caustic and then we'll eat the nail instead? Okay? That's the version of high school science that's like, let's just see what happens. Right? We're going to take this thing and put them together, and let's just see what happens. And then after it happens, I'll explain to you why it happens. Yeah, high school science curriculum sucks. Because they don't teach you the experimentation part, because they don't trust you with that, because they don't want the building to blow up. Right? There's no research question is like, what's inside of a dead cat? Guts and stuff. Like, that's what's inside of a dead cat. That's not a research question. So a lot of times you aren't actually exposed to this in high school, but you remember that one thing that you did and that one kid that got hurt by doing it. Right? Johnny had to use the eye wash station because it splashed up into his face, and the parents kind of sued the school a little bit. But it's okay because he got glasses and it was fine afterwards. The scarring went away. So let's reteach this. A research hypothesis is one where you are trying to explain the relationship, usually in a causal way, between two variables or multiple variables. Right? We're trying to explain what's going to happen. This is one of the things that I remember from high school physics. It's an equation. Force equals mass times acceleration. Force equals mass times acceleration. So basically, when you get hit with something, how much it hurts depends upon what you get hit with and how fast it hits you. Now this is a hard science, right? Physics is a hard science. We know the answers. It's deterministic. But we can still use it as a method of comparison to say, what happens when you fall off of a roof? Can you make a parachute out of something? Your shirt. Well, the question is, does the shirt and the parachute reduce your acceleration? Does it slow you down? Do you float down to the sky? Okay. Let's think about this in terms of social science. What is the relationship between drinking and health? It's complicated. Public health people. Is drinking a good thing or a bad thing? Yes. I don't mean liquid. I mean the real drinking. Not the fake drinking that we do to get ourselves through the day. The real drinking. Is drinking good or bad? Why bad? Because it's literally poison. Alcohol is trying to kill you. But fortunately for your bodies, you have what? You have a liver, right? And the liver is there to take the alcohol and break it down into sugars, and sugar is good. Okay? So that's the biology question. Is drinking good for your health? The answer is not really, but you can tolerate some of it. Now let's add the public health in there. Is allowing people to drink alcohol good for public health? Everybody's health. The health of our society. Okay, what sort of bad decisions could be made while drinking? Driving? Fisticuffs? What? No. Come on, close your eyes. Think about that last thing that you regret you did when you're drunk, and like blurt it out to everybody in the room, or your friend did. Drink to excess and vomit everywhere. Have sex without protection. Have sex with that person of all people. Vandalism. You know what I took home for my 21st birthday? The mailbox of the bar that I was drinking at. Why? Because I wanted a souvenir. Dumb, dumb, dumb. Right? So we need to understand, all right, is drinking good or bad? What is its impact on public health? We're trying to think of a research question. Okay. Now we're starting to, in our minds, take concepts and quantify them, right? So how can we quantify something like DUIs? We can, at minimum, we got fingers and toes, so we can do what to them? We can count them, right? But then there's like those DUIs that are just the, oh, not a big deal kind of thing. And then there's the really, really bad, horrific ones. What happens with the really, really bad, horrific ones?
People die.
People die. So we could count how many people die, right? Okay. But don't people die in car accidents anyways? Like, even if you're not drinking? Oh, man. So maybe it's not the drinking that's the problem. Maybe it's the cars that are the problem. Not a Volvo yet. We're going to get there. So the more that we think about these relationships, the more variables that we can come out with. What are probably some of the main reasons why we get into car accidents? You're distracted. Driver error. Get off your goddamn phones. What else? That's your own fault. Force times mass times acceleration. Road conditions, that's what I wanted, right? Either the roads are not flat, which is kind of really important, or they're not straight, which is also really important, or they're also not dry, right? Wet roads, slick roads, icy roads, okay? So as we start to think about this, we're thinking of, all right, we have a relationship we're trying to test or examine. We're creating variables that can influence this relationship. So what we're getting at is a research question as to why something happens. Now, for an academic, I get research questions all the time. They just sort of pop up. Because for academics, we tend to think about science as a body of literature. So I'm working on a paper with a comm professor. I've got some interesting data. I look at what candidates for judicial office say to voters when they run a television advertisement. There's a guy, William Benoit, who has a theory known as functional theory. And it says that when you run an advertisement, the goal should be what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to win an election, your advertisement should be tailored to winning an election. Great, Captain Obvious. Thanks for your help. But what he does is he then sort of classifies different types of advertisements and says these are more likely to pursue the goal of winning an election versus not winning an election. So if I'm interested in judicial ads, there is a whole literature out there. There's like a conversation going on about what content gets placed into campaign advertisements. So my research question, I can build off of this previous research question. And I can apply his theory to my data. This is why professors want you to read. Because we want you to be able to see that a conversation is taking place. See if I can find a recent article that I've had. This thing's going to be filled with I broke it. There we go. No, that's a bad one. Sorry. This is what happens when you try to be spontaneous. Yeah. Here we go. This is a journal article about, of all things, watching sports. And what the authors are doing here is they're writing about whether sports commentators, so the people talking, describing what's going on in the field, can reduce the enjoyment of your actual watching of the event. Does that make sense? So for those of you who watch sports, do any of you have announcers you don't like? Chris Collinsworth. So that's Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth on Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football on NBC. Why don't you like Chris Collinsworth? Because there you go. Because they state the obvious. Believe it or not, this is an area of research that professors write on. All right. Presently, the popularity of professional and non-professional athletes has transcended beyond the playing field and into the world of celebrity and pop culture. Due to increasing media saturation, modern sports coverage of these athletes has grown exponentially. So what does this mean? Sports are no longer sports. Sports are entertainment, and everybody likes to be entertained, and that's why we care whether or not LeBron James likes something on Instagram or not, or what shoes he wears, or where he eats, or whether or not they're going to take a stand against police brutality, whatever, right? Go on down through the list. You notice that at the end of this sentence, there's a citation. That's our literature review. This is where professors are talking to each other about ideas on how the world works. And when you're reading an article, you're going to keep seeing these citations. In recent years, both the ways in which media producers create stories and the values under which they operate have been explored by scholars in a variety of domains, including mass comm, journalism, and political science. How do we know that? We'll read this article, because they'll explain how more and more people are looking into this. So where do our attitudes come from? Well, the definition of attitude is a contested one, especially in social psych. Greenwald and Nozick have stated that attitudes and hypothetical constructs cannot be directly observed, which is actually kind of true, right? So how can I observe the fact that you don't like Tom Brady or LeBron James? I can't really, right? You have to just tell me. I don't like that person. However, others have argued that attitudes can indeed be operationalized and measured. Eagley and Chaikin define attitudes as the evaluations of like or dislike of a specific object to a specific degree. So on a scale of 0 to 100, tell me your feelings towards LeBron James, 0 being cold, 100 being hot. It's known as a feeling thermometer. Well, LeBron's okay. He's a 50. Oh, I love LeBron James. He's like a 99-100. Okay. And where do these evaluations come from? These evaluations may stem from beliefs, affect, and behavioral information. See these other people. So maybe whether or not we like athletes, which we can now, these people are arguing we can measure how much we like athletes, maybe, just maybe, whether or not we like athletes is influenced by who we're watching discuss the athletes. So who's the most controversial football player right now that's not actually playing football? Anybody? Colin Kaepernick. Okay? Colin Kaepernick uses the national anthem, past tense, he did it for one season, to protest the inequalities in American society by kneeling. Okay? Now, some people find this offensive because some people believe you should stand when the national anthem plays. Why? Authority. You should stand when the national anthem plays. It's just a commonly held belief. It is not a law. You cannot be arrested for not standing during the national anthem. But it's a commonly held belief. Now, whether or not you like Colin Kaepernick, can that be influenced by the person who is describing to you what Colin Kaepernick did? Let's find out. Okay. The study aimed to investigate the framing effects of sports media. 3 relevant factors were examined: narrative focus of the story, religious affiliation of the featured athletes, and dimensions of sports fanships among the processing audience. Overall, character-focused narratives were evaluated more positively than performance-focused narratives. Contrary to the traditional approach of sports journalism, where stories are based on the statistics of in-game performances, current trends in the field are the result in the stories that emphasize the relationship between sport, celebrity, and pop culture. The reason ESPN stops talking about sports and starts talking about who's dating whom is because you guys like it better. This study provides evidence that media audiences favor the latter, which is emphasizing the relationship between sports, celebrity, and pop culture. Essentially, people watching sports on TV don't actually watch it for sports. Okay? Now, some of you are shaking your head. You're like, hell no. Well, guess what? Evidence, right? They did a study. They had a research question. They did a study. If you're having something that's going, I don't believe this, this is where you get to decide, I'm going to enter this conversation. You know, you need to find the way in which to enter the conversation. And that's by developing your own research hypothesis. All right. With a research hypothesis, you're identifying what factors, I can't not use the word thing, what things, stuff, concept, objects, what are your variables? And in traditional science, we have 2 types of variables. Independent variables, those things that in experimental science are manipulated by the researcher. I can manipulate the lights. Imagine if I had a theory that people would like me more if they couldn't physically see me. How could I test this? Well, on Tuesday, the class lights will be on. On Thursday, the class lights will be off. Let's see if I get higher evaluations on Thursday. That's a sort of a classical experiment. I can manipulate whether or not the lights are on or not. The dependent variable, I don't have as much control over, and it's the thing that I'm actually trying to see if it changes. So we're going to use Y for that. Don't ask me where the letter things come from. Doesn't matter. The whole world is accepted. Independent variables are X's, dependent variables are Y. So if I describe to you a study about a person's religion affecting their drinking behavior, which one is the dependent variable? Why? No, they're all measured. I can measure religion. No. Well, religion doesn't change? Okay, it's the outcome that I'm most interested in to see if it does change. Okay? So I have my research question. The next step is to actually collect data. Fortunately for you in this class, I've got all the data collected for you. I got a ton of data available to you. You are not going to have to bother your sorority sisters to fill out a survey. Not going to be a problem. I've got a good 60 years worth of omnibus surveys that ask every question possible, including ones with words that we don't use in society anymore. Right? That's how far back the stuff goes. So, what we're doing in our version of science, again, our social science, is we tend to think about, okay, who is it that we can study? We're not talking about laws, right? Laws of physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. Helps us know where the moon's going to be on any given day. We're talking more about individual behavior. Now, we have to distinguish what it is we're actually studying. Are we studying a population? Population means everybody. All total number of possible units, elements, objects, whatever that could be included in a study. So back to my experiment of turning the lights out to see if I get higher student evaluations. What's the population of that I'm going to study? My class, okay? And how many people am I going to study? That's 2 groups, but how many people? It depends on how many are on the roster, right? This class is 25. So my population of student evaluations is going to be 25, if you all do them, right? The alternative is to take a sample instead. A sample is a subset of the population used to represent the entire population. So in my study, I'm only going to care about these people and how they do on my student evaluations, or those people. Or what actually traditionally happens, my subset is going to be the people who actually take the time to do the student evaluation, right? Because reality is we never get 100% response rate on these things. Consider that a challenge. So our population is the broader thing. Now, we could have populations that are small enough that can be measured. So like I said, 25 people in a room, I can measure 25 people in a room and create a data set on this population of students. POLI 20501. But what happens most frequently is I actually have a sample. So you are a sample of coastal students, or you're a sample of public health majors. So I've got like 4 or 5 of you guys. Okay. I don't think I should have any seniors in here. Maybe you could be a sample of underclassmen. The reason I point this out is you, as the researcher, sort of define whether or not you're working with a population or a sample. Because you, right now, are both a sample and a population. You are a sample of coastal students, but you are the population of my class. Make sense? So this is a little bit more theoretical, right? If I have measurement of data from all 50 states, do I have a sample or a population? Doug's really confused. Why, Doug? Do I have a sample or do I have a population? If I have data on all 50 states, is that a sample or a population? You're not Doug. All 50 states. All right, you would incline to go, well, that's a population. And I can treat it as if it is a population. I can also treat it as a sample. You know why? Because states have been around for multiple years. So I can say that my data of all 50 states is actually a sample of all state years. Because states have been around for more than 1 year. And so you're going, this is bullshit. And I completely agree with you. But you are the scientist. And so you get to frame in your study whether or not you claim to be measuring a population or just a sample.
Researching people in
Yes. But are you telling me you're going to ask every single person in the United States?
No, just...
Okay. So could a sample of U.S. citizens be a sample of the world? Yes, because we're all people on the same earth, I think, most days. Okay. You got it. Once you have your data, so step 3 is then you got to figure out what you're going to do with your data. How is it that you're going to test for these relationships? And ladies and gentlemen, this is the point of the class. This is what we're going to learn in the class. We're going to learn how once we have data, what do you do with it to see if there's a relationship or not? Okay. What are we doing? We're testing for causal relationships. Now, a little bit in me kind of cringed because as a social scientist, we don't really embrace the use of that term causal. That's more for the hard sciences. That's more for things that are determined. But I'll power through it today. I'll live with the chest pain. Because the idea is that the observed differences in our outcomes were, I got to throw up the air quotes, chest pain's too much, caused, influenced, affected by what we theorize to be our independent variables. Okay. Under classical science, again, if you were done doing science in high school, hopefully they taught you this idea of what a control variable is. We keep conditions the same except for the ones that we're interested in changing. So if I'm doing back to my study of whether or not I get higher evaluations with the lights off in a class, in 2 different classes, what is it that I can control about the 2 different classes? That's what I can change. But what else can I control to keep conditions the same? No, because you're my subjects. I don't want to change the people. What do I need to keep the same? Yeah, me. I need to keep me the same, right? So I can't be kind and nice when the lights are on and a virulent racist when the lights are off, right? I got to keep the swearing at about an equal pace, right? All the things that students like or dislike, I got to be the same in each class. Oh, it's going to be really hard. Okay. And it would be nice if I could randomly assign people into these classrooms. But you know what? That's already been done for me because I didn't have control as to who's in my class or not. But randomization is good when you're dealing with samples because you want to make sure that there's no bias that's skewing people into one class over the other. Okay, I got 5 minutes left. I need all 5. So what method you're going to use? Well, that's going to be in this class. I'm going to teach you some of the methods that you can use. Step 4, use the method. Actually compute a result. Analyze the data that you have. And in this class, we're going to create 2 different types of data. One is descriptive data, descriptive statistics. And what descriptive statistics do is they summarize, excuse me, they summarize and describe the data that we have observed. Batting average is an example of descriptive data. Miles per gallon is descriptive data. descriptive data itself doesn't really answer a research question. It paints a snapshot of what your data says, but it doesn't answer a research question. If my car gets 14.9 miles per gallon, what does that tell you about anything? It just tells you I get 14.9 miles per gallon. If I want to compare that to something else, anybody else have a better car? She gets 40 miles per gallon in her mythical supercar. What kind of car do you drive? Little tiny box thing. All right. So my giant box gets 14.9, and she claims 40 miles per gallon. I haven't even heard of that kind of car. Just a little tiny cube, right? Magic cube, yeah. Is that the one with the hamsters?
No, that's the Soul.
That's the Soul. All right. She gets 40, I get 14. Those are descriptive statistics. Now, if we want to draw conclusions, right? Is your car better than my car? Well, actually, we need to know one other piece of data. What's the average? What does a typical car get? Right? So we can use descriptive statistics to make an inference, to draw a conclusion. And we'll do that in this class. We'll compare the average of two groups and see, is that really different? How many seats are in your car? You can really fit a fifth person in there?
It's a bench seat in the back. So.
Let's go with 4. I didn't ask you the number of seat belts. I asked you the number of people you could fit in your car. Okay, 8. So maybe the number of seats has something to do with gas mileage. Maybe. All right. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to analyze our data. Fifth step, draw a conclusion. We're going to use the decision from analyzing our data to see whether or not that supports our research hypothesis. I'm glad that the book makes this distinction. Support. Support is not final. The idea of proving, that's kind of final, right? So we can support the idea that red wine improves your health. But can we prove that red wine improves your health? Because prove is like, it's like a certainty. And we're in the social sciences. We're a little iffy about that. Because people can change. Right? So we tend not to go towards absolutist, deterministic language like prove. So let's not do that in here, okay? Support, a gentler, kinder conclusion. The last thing we do, once we have a finding, we got to tell people what it means. We got to draw a conclusion from it. We have to communicate this to the rest of the world. Remember how I told you I like to collect these odd sort of things? Student evaluations. 2 articles that I have read, actually 3. Let's see which one is the serious one. If I give you chocolate, that like come in and, oh, hey guys, have some chocolate. The day you do your evaluation, what do you think happens to my evaluation?
It's gonna go up.
If I wear a tie, a suit and tie the first 2 weeks of class, what do you think happens to my evaluation? It actually goes up. But I only have to do it for the first 2 weeks. I don't have to do it all semester long. Makes no sense whatsoever. Finally, the third one, I have a penis. What do you think that does to my evaluations? Goes up. The evaluation score. Okay? Why? Because people don't think women are credible. This is an experiment that I love. They did an online course, and the only thing different in the online course was the name of the instructor. The male name got the higher ratings. They never actually interacted with the professor. So I'm off to a good start. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for your time. Now that I know how much material I got through, I can figure out what to put online for a video. This covered most of chapter 1. I might do a video on where to get some data, so give me a day or two before you start emailing me about there's no video online. But you should have what you need if you want to go ahead and take the quiz.